Never look a guest in the eyes. That was rule number 1. But the moment the door opened, I broke it. The hallway smelled like polished marble and expensive cologne, the kind that lingered long after people left, and my hands were already trembling around the silver tray before I even knocked. Room 2701. Top floor. Private access. The kind of suite that didn't get listed online. The kind that belonged to men people didn't talk about out loud. I knocked twice, soft, controlled, just like they trained us, then lowered my voice to something small enough to disappear. Room service. Silence answered first. Thick, heavy, then the click. The door opened just a few inches, and I saw the edge of a tailored black suit, sharp enough to cut through the dim light. My breath caught before I could stop it, because I knew that suit. I knew the way it fit. I knew the man who wore it like armor. The door opened wider, and the world narrowed to a single point. Adrian Blackwood stood in front of me, 6'2", shoulders squared, presence filling the doorway like he owned not just the room, but the entire building, the entire city. 3 years. 3 years since I last saw him, and somehow, nothing had changed. Not the dark hair, perfectly styled. Not the cold, steady eyes that missed nothing. Not the quiet authority that made everything around him feel smaller. But something inside me shifted, cracked open, because I wasn't supposed to see him again. Not like this. Not ever. I dropped my gaze immediately, forcing my voice to stay steady even as my pulse pounded against my ribs. Your dinner, sir. The word sir tasted wrong. It didn't belong between us. It never had. He didn't reach for the tray. Didn't move at all. The silence stretched just long enough to feel deliberate. Calculated. Like he was deciding something. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, just enough for the hallway light to catch his face. His eyes locked onto me, and I felt it. Recognition hovering just beneath the surface, not fully formed yet, but close. Too close. Behind him, I caught movement. 2 men. Dark suits. Earpieces. Watching everything without looking like they were watching anything at all. My grip tightened on the tray. I needed to leave. Now. If there's nothing else, I'll wait. One word. Low. Controlled. It stopped me mid-step like a hand against my chest. I froze. Of course I did. People didn't ignore that tone. Not him. Not ever. I turned back slowly, keeping my head down, praying the dim hallway lighting would hide the parts of me I couldn't erase. The parts he would remember. Yes, sir. The question barely made it out. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Not rushed. Just deliberate. Every movement measured. The way he always moved when he was thinking. When he was studying something. Or someone. Where did you get that scar? The question cut clean through the air. My heart stuttered. Just once. But it was enough. His eyes had dropped to my wrist. Of course they had. Even after all this time, he noticed everything. I curled my fingers tighter around the tray, trying to angle my arm away, but it was too late. It's nothing, I said quickly. Too quickly. Kitchen accident. He didn't respond right away. That was worse. Silence meant he was processing. Comparing. Remembering. I could feel it happening. The past rising up between us. Uninvited, undeniable. I shifted my weight, forcing a small step back. If you'll excuse me, his hand closed around my wrist. Not hard. Not enough to hurt. But enough to stop me completely. My breath caught. His grip was the same. Firm. Controlled. Unyielding. I hadn't felt it in 3 years, but my body remembered instantly. The way everything stilled under his touch. The way escape stopped being an option. You're shaking, he said quietly. Not accusing. Not concerned. Just stating a fact. I swallowed. It's cold. It wasn't. The hallway was perfectly climate controlled, set to a comfortable 72 degrees. We both knew it. His thumb shifted slightly against my wrist, not pressing, just resting there, like he was feeling the rhythm of my pulse. Counting. Measuring. My heartbeat betrayed me. Racing too fast, too uneven. He noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. Take off the glove. My stomach dropped. The words were calm. Simple. But underneath them was something else. Something sharper. I shook my head instinctively. Sir, I really need to take it off. This time, there was no mistaking it. Not a request. A command. The kind people built entire lives around obeying. The kind I used to obey without thinking. I shouldn't have listened. I knew that. Every instinct I had. Left told me to pull away, to drop the tray, to run down the hallway, and never look back. but my fingers were already moving. Slow. Careful. Like they didn't belong to me anymore. I slipped the glove off. Inch by inch. The cool air hit my skin first. Then the light caught the metal. The ring. Simple. Gold. Unmistakable. The one thing I never should have kept. The one thing I couldn't let go of. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. Final. I didn't need to look up to know what had changed. I felt it. In the way his grip tightened just slightly. In the way the air seemed to thin. In the way everything else, the hallway, the guards, the entire world, fell away. Elena. My name didn't sound like a question. It sounded like the end of one story. And the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. I closed my eyes for half a second. That was all I allowed myself. Then I opened them. And looked up. Right into his. There was no mistaking it now. He knew. Completely. Fully. The man I had left behind 3 years ago was standing inches from me, holding my wrist like I had never disappeared, like time hadn't touched us at all. But something else was there too. Something new. Something darker. His earpiece crackled softly. One of the men behind him shifted. A voice, low and urgent, barely audible, but impossible to ignore. Sir, we have movement. Target may be inside. Target. The word landed wrong. My breath hitched. Adrian didn't look away from me. Not even for a second. His hand tightened, just enough to ground me in place. Interesting, he murmured, voice so low it barely carried. Then, without warning, he stepped aside and pulled me across the threshold into the suite. The door closed behind me with a soft, final click. And just like that, I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was in his world again. The one I ran from. The one that was never supposed to find me. He didn't let go of my wrist. Not yet. Instead, he leaned in just enough that only I could hear him, his voice brushing against the space between us like a secret. You didn't leave me, he said quietly. A pause. Then, softer. More dangerous. You were running. The door closed behind me, and the sound was soft, almost polite, but it carried the weight of something final, something that told me there was no easy way back out. I stood there for a second too long, the silver tray still in my hands, my wrist still caught in his, and the room around me felt too quiet, too controlled, like even the air had rules I had forgotten. Adrian did not move away. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His presence filled the entire suite, stretching from the polished floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, lights flickering miles below like a distant constellation. 3 years ago, I used to stand in rooms like this and feel small. Tonight, I felt exposed. Running from who? He asked, and the question was calm, almost conversational, but it landed heavier than anything louder could have. I forced myself to breathe slowly, steady, the way I had practiced, the way I had learned to survive the last 3 years without him, without this world. You are mistaken, I said, keeping my voice even. I think you have the wrong person. The words sounded rehearsed, because they were. I had said them before. To strangers. To officials. To anyone who got too close. But never to him. Never to Adrian Blackwood. His eyes did not leave mine. Not even for a second. I have never been mistaken about you, he said quietly. That was the problem. He was right. He never had been. I shifted my weight, trying to pull my wrist free without making it obvious. But his grip adjusted instantly. Not tighter, not forceful. Just enough to remind me that he was still in control of this moment. Always in control. Behind him, one of the men moved slightly, his voice low into the microphone at his collar. Perimeter is secure. No confirmed entry yet. The words barely registered at first, but then they settled in, slow and deliberate, like everything else in this room. Target. Movement. Secure. This was not just a hotel room. This was a controlled environment. And I had just walked straight into it. My pulse picked up again, faster this time, harder to hide. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. He always read the things I tried to bury. You heard that, he said. Not a question. I said nothing. Silence had always been my safest answer. He tilted his head slightly, studying me the way he used to when something did not add up. When he was deciding whether to push or to wait. You are not surprised, he continued. You are calculating. I swallowed. That was worse. I do not know what you are talking about, I said, but my voice betrayed me just enough to make the lie obvious. It always had with him. He took a slow step closer, closing the small distance between us until I could feel the warmth of his presence, steady, controlled, impossible to ignore. You walked into a private floor, past 2 layers of security, carrying a tray you did not even bother to balance properly, he said, his voice still quiet, still measured. You flinched before I spoke. You knew it was me. Every word landed with precision. Not accusations. Observations. Facts. I tightened my fingers around the edge of the tray. I did my job, I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded now. His gaze dropped briefly to the tray, then back to my face. You never were good at lying to me. That almost made me laugh. Almost. But there was nothing funny about standing here again, under his scrutiny, with nowhere to hide. Let go, I said softly. Not a demand. Not quite a plea. Just a boundary. One I needed. He did not respond right away. For a second, I thought he would refuse. That he would keep holding on, like he used to when he did not want me to walk away, when he thought holding tighter could fix things that were already breaking. But then, slowly, he released my wrist. The absence of his touch felt louder than the contact had been. I stepped back immediately, putting space between us, even though the room suddenly felt larger than it had a second ago. I set the tray down on the nearest table, my hands finally free, but not steady. Not yet. Adrian watched me the entire time. Not moving. Not interrupting. Just watching. You changed your name, he said after a moment. I froze. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. His eyes sharpened. Carter, he added. That is what your badge says. I should have expected that. Of course he would notice. Of course he would remember the details. It is common, I replied, forcing calm back into my voice. Lots of people have that name. He almost smiled. Not warmth. Not humor. Just recognition of the attempt. You also changed your walk, he continued. Your posture. Your voice. He took another slow step, circling slightly, not closing in, but not letting me forget he could. But you kept the ring. My fingers curled instinctively at my side. I did not look down. I did not need to. I knew exactly what he was seeing. It does not mean anything, I said, the lie automatic, immediate. His gaze flickered, just for a second, something unreadable passing through his expression. That is the one thing I know is not true. The earpiece crackled again. Sir, we are picking up a signal. Same identifier. It is close. This time, the words hit harder. Closer. My breath shortened. I could feel it now. The reason I had come here. The reason I had taken this job. This shift. This risk. It was not him. It had never been him. Adrian noticed the shift instantly. The tension. The change in my breathing. The way my attention pulled toward the door for half a second before snapping back. There it is, he said softly. That is what you are running from. I shook my head. You are wrong. Then prove it. His voice did not rise, but it sharpened just enough to cut through everything else. Tell me why you are here, Elena. The name again. It settled into the space between us like something permanent, something that refused to be ignored. I opened my mouth, closed it, because the truth was not simple. It was not safe, and it was not something I could just hand to him, not after everything that had happened, not after everything I had done to stay away. He watched the hesitation, understood it. Someone is looking for you, he said. Not a guess, a conclusion. I did not answer. I did not have to. His eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Decision. And you came here, he continued slowly, to hide in the one place you thought they would not check. A pause. Then, quieter. My world. I felt it then. The shift. Not just in him. In everything. Because he was right. I had not come here for him. But I had come into his territory. Into his control. And that changed everything. He stepped closer again, not reaching this time, not touching, but close enough that his voice did not need to carry. You should have told me, he said. I let out a small breath that felt like it had been waiting 3 years to escape. I could not. You did not try. That was not entirely true. But it was not entirely wrong either. Silence stretched between us again, heavier now, filled with everything we were not saying. Everything we could not say. Then the earpiece crackled one more time. Sharper this time. Urgent. Sir, we have confirmation. The target is not just nearby. A pause. Just long enough to matter. They are already inside the building. My heart stopped for a second. Just one. Then slammed back harder. Adrian did not look away from me. Not even now. Not even with that information hanging in the air. Instead, he made a decision. I saw it happen. The exact moment it locked into place. He turned his head slightly, just enough to address the men behind him without breaking eye contact with me. "Lock down the floor," he said calmly. "No one in or out without my approval." Then, softer, but more final. "And no one touches her." The last part was not for them. It was for me. And somehow, that was worse. Because protection from Adrian Blackwood had never come without a cost. He looked back at me fully, the distance between us gone again, replaced by something tighter. More personal. "You are not leaving," he said quietly. Not a threat. Not a command. Just a fact. Then, after a beat that felt like a lifetime, he added, "Not this time." The word leaving did not belong in that room anymore. Not after the way he said it. Not after the way the locks on this floor had already clicked into place somewhere beyond the walls, quiet but absolute, like everything else in his world. I stood there, a few feet away from him, feeling the distance and the weight of it at the same time, because 3 years ago I had learned how to walk away from Adrian Blackwood, but I had never learned how to stand still in front of him again. "You cannot decide that for me," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, which was the only victory I could claim right now. He watched me like he always did when I pushed back, not annoyed, not surprised, just interested, like resistance was something he expected, something he measured. "I already did," he replied, calm, unshaken, like the decision had been made long before I stepped into this room. Behind him, one of the men shifted position, his voice low but urgent as he spoke into his collar. "Elevators are locked. Stairwell access is restricted. We are sweeping the lower levels now." The words settled into the space between us, confirming what I already knew. This was not temporary. This was not precaution. This was control. I folded my arms slowly, not defensive, just grounding myself, creating some kind of boundary where none existed. "Then you are trapping the wrong person," I said. He tilted his head slightly, studying me again, the same way he used to when he knew I was holding something back, when he was deciding how far to push before something broke. "No," he said quietly. "I am keeping the only person in this building who matters." The statement should have sounded arrogant. It should have sounded like the same possessive logic he always used to justify his decisions. But it did not. Not entirely. Because there was something else underneath it now. Something sharper. Something that had nothing to do with control and everything to do with understanding the situation faster than I could deny it. I turned away from him, just for a second, needing space to think, needing to break the direct line of his gaze that always made everything feel too exposed. The city stretched beyond the glass, miles of light and motion, people moving through their lives without knowing what was unfolding 27 floors above them. For a moment, I envied that distance, that normalcy. "You should not be involved in this," I said, keeping my voice low, measured. "This has nothing to do with you." I heard him move behind me, not fast, not aggressive, just enough to remind me that distance was something he allowed, not something I controlled. "Everything about you has something to do with me," he said. The words were quiet, not dramatic, not loud, but final. I closed my eyes briefly, just a fraction of a second, because that was the exact problem I had spent 3 years trying to escape. That is exactly why I left. I said before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was different, heavier, not tactical, not calculated, personal. I felt it shift in the room before I even turned back around. Adrian did not move closer this time. He stayed where he was, a few feet away, but something in his posture changed, something subtle that only I would notice because I had spent years learning every version of him. "You left without a word," he said. Not accusing, not angry, just stating a fact that had never been resolved. I met his eyes, fully this time. No hiding, no pretending. I had to. "No," he said just as calm. "You chose to." That stung more than anything louder could have. Because part of me knew he was right, and part of me knew he was not. If I had stayed, I said slowly, choosing each word carefully, I would not be standing here right now. That caught his attention. Not the words themselves, but the way I said them. The certainty, the lack of hesitation. His gaze sharpened, focusing in a way that meant he was no longer looking at the past. He was looking at the present, at the threat. "Explain," he said. A single word. Direct. I hesitated. Not because I did not want to answer, but because answering meant pulling him deeper into something I had spent 3 years keeping away from him. Keeping away from everything he controlled. The earpiece crackled again, louder this time, cutting through the silence. "Sir," We have a visual on a possible contact on the 12th floor. Behavior is inconsistent with hotel guests. We are monitoring. Adrian did not look away from me. Not even now. They are looking for you, he said quietly. It was not a guess anymore. It was a conclusion. I exhaled slowly, the tension I had been holding finally slipping just enough to make the truth unavoidable. Yes, I admitted. The word felt heavier than it should have, because it changed everything. It made it real in a way silence could not. His expression did not change much, but I saw it. The shift, the calculation moving into something more precise, more focused. How long, he asked. Since when? 3 years, I said. That landed. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened just slightly, in the way his eyes held mine a fraction longer than before. Not anger. Not yet. Just understanding the scale of what I had kept from him. You have been running for 3 years, he repeated, quieter now. I nodded once. There was no point denying it anymore. And you thought you could walk into my building, he continued. Into my territory, and it would not reach me? I let out a small breath, something almost like a humorless laugh. I thought it was the one place they would hesitate. That was the truth. The only place powerful enough to make others think twice. The only place dangerous enough to be safe. Adrian studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, like something in that answer aligned with what he already understood. You are right, he said. That surprised me. They will hesitate here. A pause. Then, more quietly. But they will not stop. The words settled deep, because I knew he was right. I had counted on hesitation, not absence. The difference mattered now. A lot. He took a step closer again, not to corner me, but to narrow the distance just enough to make his next words impossible to ignore. Which means, he said, voice low and certain, you did not come here to hide. I felt my pulse spike again. He saw it instantly. You came here, he finished, because you knew they would follow. The realization hit harder hearing it out loud, because it sounded exactly like what it was. Not escape, not safety, strategy. I did not answer. I did not have to. His eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Approval. You led them here, he said. Not accusing, not impressed, just acknowledging it for what it was. I held his gaze, steady now, because there was no point pretending anymore. I needed somewhere they could not disappear, I said quietly. The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. Not tension, not distance. Alignment. Adrian did not smile. He did not react the way most people would. Instead, he nodded once, slow, deliberate, like a piece of a larger puzzle had just locked into place. Then they made a mistake, he said. I felt the shift immediately. The room changed. The energy changed. This was no longer about keeping me here. It was about what came next. He turned slightly toward the men behind him, his voice calm, controlled, but carrying something new beneath it. Adjust the perimeter, he said. We are not just containing this anymore. A pause. Then, quieter, but sharper. We are finishing it. He looked back at me, and for the first time since I stepped into that room, I understood something I had not expected. I had come here thinking I was still running. But standing in front of him now, I realized something else entirely. I had not run into danger. I had run into the only place that could end it. And Adrian Blackwood already knew it. The shift happened so quietly, it almost felt unreal, like the moment before a storm when the air changes, but nothing has moved yet. And somehow that was more unsettling than anything loud or obvious. Adrian did not raise his voice, did not rush, did not even look toward the door when his men started moving with sharper precision behind him, but everything in the room adjusted around him like gravity had just changed direction. I stood there, watching it unfold, and for the first time since I stepped into this suite, I was not thinking about escape. I was thinking about what came next. You planned this, he said, not looking at his men, not looking at anything but me, and it was not a question anymore. I held his gaze, steady now, because there was no reason to hide it. I planned to stop running, I said quietly. That was the truth, even if it was not the whole truth. His eyes searched mine, not for lies, but for the edges of what I was not saying. He always knew there was more. He always waited for it. You chose my building, he continued, his tone even, but the weight behind it unmistakable. My floor. My door. A pause. That was not coincidence. I shook my head slightly. No, I admitted. It was not. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now. Not uncertain. Not fragile. It was the kind of silence that came when two people understood the same thing at the same time. Behind him, one of the men stepped closer, speaking low but fast. Sir, security cameras on levels 10 through 15 show irregular movement. We are isolating the pattern now. Adrian did not turn. He did not need to. Do it, he said simply. Then, softer, more deliberate, no alarms. Keep it contained. The man nodded and stepped back, already relaying the order. I watched all of it, the quiet efficiency, the way everything moved without hesitation, and I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in 3 years. Relief. Not complete. Not safe. But real. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. You trust me to handle this, he said, and there was something in his voice that was not there before. Not doubt. Not pride. Just recognition. I exhaled slowly. I trust that you do not lose control, I said. That was as close to trust as I could give him. As close as I could admit. His expression shifted, just slightly, something almost like understanding passing through it. That is enough, he said. Then he stepped closer, not invading, not cornering, but closing the space just enough to bring us into the same frame again. Tell me everything, he added, his voice lower now, more focused. I hesitated. Not because I did not want to, but because saying it out loud would make it real in a way I had managed to avoid. For 3 years, I had carried it alone. Controlled it. Managed it. If I handed it to him now, it would no longer be mine to contain. He saw the hesitation. Waited. He always knew when to wait. It started after I left. I said finally, my voice steady but quieter than before. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Small things. Being followed. Calls that disconnected when I answered. Accounts I did not recognize. His gaze sharpened slightly, focusing in. You did not tell me, he said. I shook my head. If I had told you, you would have come after them immediately. Yes, he said, without hesitation. Exactly, I replied. And then it would not have stopped. That landed. Not because he disagreed, but because he understood the consequence. I continued before I could lose the momentum. I moved. Changed my name. Changed everything I could. For a while, it worked. They stayed distant. Watching. Waiting. The word waiting hung heavier than the rest. His jaw tightened just slightly. They were building something, he said. Again, not a question. I nodded. Once. Yes. Behind him, the earpiece crackled again, sharper this time. Sir, we have identified at least 2 individuals matching the pattern. They are not interacting with staff. Moving independently. Adrian's focus did not shift. Not yet. Keep tracking, he said. Do not engage. Then his attention returned fully to me. Why now, he asked. Why come here tonight? That was the hardest part. Not because it was complicated, but because it was simple. Because they stopped waiting, I said. The words settled heavily in the room. 3 days ago, I continued, they got closer. Too close. They were not just watching anymore. They were positioning. His eyes darkened slightly, not with fear, but with calculation sharpening into something more precise. So you changed the game, he said. I nodded. I needed to control where it happened. A small pause. Then, quieter, and who it involved. He held my gaze, understanding unfolding piece by piece. You chose me, he said. Not ego. Not assumption. Just fact. I did not answer right away. Because this part mattered. Because this part was not strategy. It was something else. I chose the one person they would not expect me to go back to, I said finally. His expression shifted again, subtle but real. And he pressed. I held his eyes. Did not look away. And the only one who could end it. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything we had not said in 3 years. Everything that still existed under the surface, unchanged by time or distance. Adrian did not move for a moment. Then he nodded once, slow, deliberate. Decision. Final. He turned slightly toward his men, his voice calm, but carrying a sharper edge now. Expand surveillance to all upper levels, he said. Cross-reference with building access logs from the last 6 hours. A pause. Then, more focused. No one leaves without clearance. The men moved immediately. No hesitation, no questions. I watched them go, then looked back at him. You are turning this into something bigger, I said quietly. He met my gaze without hesitation. It already is, he replied. That was the truth. We both knew it. He stepped closer again, just enough to narrow the space between us, his presence steady, grounding in a way I had not expected. You spent 3 years staying ahead of them, he said. That ends tonight. I felt my breath catch slightly. Not fear. Not entirely. Something else. Something unfamiliar after so long. You sound certain, I said. He did not smile. He did not soften. He just looked at me with that same steady intensity that had never changed. I am, he said. Then, after a brief pause, quieter, but more personal, because you are not alone anymore. The words settled deeper than anything else he had said tonight, because they were not about control, not about power. They were about something I had not allowed myself to rely on, not since I left. I looked at him, really looked this time, and for the first time since I stepped into that room, I did not see just the man I had run from. I saw the one I had trusted once, the one I had left behind, and the one standing in front of me now, still capable of stepping into danger without hesitation, not because he had to, but because I was here. The earpiece crackled again, sharper, urgent now. Sir, movement confirmed on this floor. A pause. They are closer than we expected. The air shifted instantly. Adrian did not look away from me, but something in him sharpened, focused, locked in. Then they are right on time, he said quietly. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. I had not just led danger into his world. I had walked back into it at the exact moment he was ready to take control of it completely. And there was no turning back now. The moment the words closer than we expected settled into the room, everything inside me tightened, not in panic, not in fear, but in recognition, because this was the exact point I had been trying to reach for 3 years, the moment when running stopped being an option and facing it became the only path left. Adrian did not move right away, and somehow that stillness was louder than any reaction could have been, like the entire situation had just aligned exactly the way he needed it to. How many? He asked, his voice low, controlled, not a trace of urgency, just precision. The response came instantly through the earpiece. At least 2 confirmed, possibly more. They are not using main access points. Adrian nodded once, absorbing it, processing it faster than anyone else in the room could keep up with. Pattern, he asked. Deliberate. Coordinated. They are avoiding cameras where they can. That made sense. It always had. I felt his attention shift back to me, not fully turning, not breaking focus on the situation, but pulling me back into the center of it. You see, he said quietly. They are not improvising. They are executing. I nodded slowly. They have been planning this for a long time. So have you, he replied. Not praise. Not criticism. Just acknowledgement. I exhaled, the weight of that truth settling deeper than I expected. Not like this, I admitted. I did not plan for this part. His eyes held mine, steady, unwavering. That is why you came to me. It was not a question anymore. I did not deny it. There was no point. Before I could respond, one of his men stepped forward, speaking quickly but clearly. Sir, we recommend moving her to a secured interior location. This suite has too many access points. Adrian did not even glance at him. No, he said calmly. We stay here. The man hesitated, just slightly. Sir, with respect, this is where they expect her to be, Adrian continued, cutting him off without raising his voice. Which means this is where we control the outcome. The logic was immediate, unavoidable. The man nodded and stepped back. I felt something shift again, not in the room, but in me, because this was exactly how Adrian operated. He did not avoid danger. He redirected it. He shaped it until it worked in his favor. And right now, that included me. I moved slightly, closing the distance between us without fully realizing it, my voice lower now, more focused. They are not just here for me, I said. They are here for what I know. His gaze sharpened immediately. Then you should have told me sooner. There it was. Not anger. Not accusation. Just the truth, delivered clean and direct. I held his eyes. If I told you sooner, they would have moved sooner. A pause. I needed them to think I was still running. He considered that for a second, then nodded once. And now they think they have cornered me. Another pause. Then, quieter. But they walked into your territory instead. Something almost like approval flickered in his expression, subtle but real. Then let us make sure they understand the difference, he said. The earpiece crackled again, sharper this time. Sir, one subject has been identified near the east corridor. He is not attempting entry yet. He is waiting. Adrian's eyes did not leave mine. Of course he is, he said softly. They are confirming the environment before committing. He turned slightly toward his men. Do not engage, he instructed. Let them believe they are still in control. I felt my pulse steady, not because the danger had lessened, but because it had become clearer, defined, predictable. That was the difference between fear and strategy. Adrian stepped closer again, his voice dropping just enough that only I could hear it. You said they started closing in 3 days ago, he said. What changed? I hesitated for half a second, then reached into the pocket of my uniform, pulling out something small, something I had kept hidden for too long. A thin flash drive. Plain, unmarked, but heavy with everything it contained. His eyes dropped to it instantly. Recognition. Understanding. That, he said quietly, is why they stopped waiting. I nodded. I did not know what it was at first, just that it was important enough to make them follow me across state lines. His gaze lifted back to mine. And now I know it is the reason they will not stop. The silence that followed was different again. Not tense, not uncertain, just focused. Adrian reached out slowly, not grabbing, not taking, just holding his hand open between us, giving me the choice. I looked at it. At him. 3 years ago, I would have handed it over without thinking, without hesitation. Then I left, and everything changed. But standing here now, with everything closing in, the decision felt different. Not about control, not about power, about survival, about trust. I placed the flash drive in his hand. His fingers closed around it carefully, deliberately, like he understood exactly what it represented. You trust me with this, he said quietly. I met his gaze. I trust that you will use it better than I can. That was the truth. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. Final. Then this ends tonight, he said. The earpiece crackled again, urgent now. Sir, second subject confirmed on this floor. They are coordinating. Adrian did not react outwardly, but I felt it. The shift, the final alignment of everything into place. He turned slightly, his voice calm, but carrying absolute authority. Positions, he said. No one moves until I say. His men responded instantly, dispersing with quiet precision, every movement controlled, every step deliberate. I stood there, watching it unfold, feeling the weight of everything I had set in motion finally catching up to me. Adrian remained where he was, directly in front of me, the center of it all. You should stay behind me, he said, his voice lower now, more personal. I shook my head slightly. I did not come here to hide behind you. His gaze held mine, searching, measuring. Then, slowly he nodded. I know, he said. A small pause. Then, softer. That is why you came here at all. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else he had said tonight. Because they were not about the situation, not about the threat. They were about me, about who I had become since I left. And somehow, he understood that without me having to explain it. The earpiece crackled one more time, sharp, immediate. Sir, they are moving. Adrian's attention shifted just enough to register it, but his focus returned to me instantly, like nothing else in the room mattered more in that moment. Stay close, he said quietly. Not a command, not a demand, just a certainty. Then he stepped forward, placing himself between me and the door, his posture calm, controlled, unshaken. And for the first time in 3 years, I realized something I had not allowed myself to believe. I was not just facing what had been chasing me. I was standing behind the one man who had never lost to anything that tried. And this time, I was not running away from him. I was standing with him. Time did not slow down when they started moving. It sharpened, every second becoming clearer, louder, more defined, like the world had narrowed into a single line that led straight to this moment, and there was no stepping off it anymore. Adrian stood between me and the door, not tense, not rigid, just present, like a fixed point everything else adjusted around, and I realized that was what made him dangerous. Not the power, not the reputation, but the certainty, the way he never hesitated once a decision was made. The earpiece crackled again, lower this time, controlled but urgent. Sir, East Corridor subject, is approaching the restricted access point. He is testing the lock. Adrian did not react outwardly. Let him, he said quietly. Do not interfere. My eyes flicked toward the door instinctively, even though I knew I would not see anything from here, not yet. The tension was not loud, not chaotic, it was precise, like something carefully constructed, and I felt it in my chest, steady and sharp. They are confirming your boundaries, I said softly. Adrian nodded once. And learning how far they can push them, he added. His gaze shifted to me briefly, not checking, not questioning, just grounding, like making sure I was still exactly where I needed to be. Stay here, he said. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. You know I will not, I replied. He studied me for half a second, then nodded, accepting it, not arguing, not forcing. That was new. 3 years ago, he would have insisted. Tonight, he adjusted. The earpiece crackled again, sharper. Sir, second subject is moving toward the central hallway. They are coordinating entry timing. Adrian shifted slightly, just enough to angle himself toward the room while still keeping me within his direct line of sight. Good, he said. That means they are committed. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. I felt my pulse steady again, not because the situation was safer, but because it was clearer. Defined threats were easier to face than invisible ones. What is your plan? I asked quietly. He glanced at me, just once. You already know it, he said. I did. Of course I did. He was not going to chase them. He was going to let them step exactly where he wanted them, then remove every option they thought they had. Control the space. Control the outcome. Always control the outcome. You are turning their move into yours, I said. He gave a small nod. They believe they are entering my world unnoticed, he replied. That is their first mistake. The earpiece crackled again, faster this time. Sir, access point has been breached. Minimal delay. They are inside the corridor. My breath caught for half a second, just enough to remind me that this was real, that the distance between planning and consequence had just disappeared. Adrian did not move. Not yet. Positions, he said calmly. Hold until. Visual confirmation. The response came instantly. Yes, sir. The room felt different now, not quieter, but more focused, like everything unnecessary had been stripped away, leaving only what mattered. I became aware of small things, the faint hum of the air system, the distant sound of movement beyond the walls, the way my own breathing had settled into something controlled, intentional. Adrian stepped slightly closer, not blocking me, not shielding me completely, but enough to create a line between me and whatever was coming. If they reach this door, he said quietly, you stay behind me. I met his gaze. And if they do not, he held my eyes for a moment. Then this ends before they get that far. There was no doubt in his voice. Not even a trace. The earpiece crackled again, sharper, more immediate. Sir, visual confirmed. 2 subjects. Moving slowly. They are scanning. Adrian's expression did not change, but something in the air did, something that told me this was the exact point he had been waiting for. Let them come closer, he said. Do not break pattern. I felt it then, the shift inside me. Not fear, not hesitation, something else, something steadier, like all the running, all the waiting, all the uncertainty of the past 3 years had finally narrowed into a single direction. Forward. I moved slightly, aligning myself with him, not behind, not in front, just beside, close enough to feel the calm in his presence, the control that never wavered. He noticed. Of course he did. His gaze flicked to me briefly, then back toward the door. You are not stepping back, he said quietly. Not a question. I shook my head. I did not come this far to step back now. A pause. Then, softer, not again. Something shifted in his expression, subtle but real, something that acknowledged the weight of that statement, the history behind it, the choice I had made not just tonight, but 3 years ago. Then stay close, he said. Not a command, not a warning, just a fact. The earpiece crackled again, urgent now. Sir, they are within 10 feet of the suite. They are pausing. My heart slowed instead of racing, steady, deliberate, like it understood this moment required clarity, not panic. Adrian did not move. He did not rush. He waited. They are listening, I said quietly. He nodded once. They want confirmation before they act. The silence stretched, thick and precise, every second measured, every movement deliberate. Then, softly, almost imperceptibly, there was a sound outside the door. Not loud, not forceful, just a presence. Close, intentional. Adrian's posture did not change, but I felt it, the exact moment everything locked into place. Now, he said quietly. The response came instantly through the earpiece, controlled and immediate. Movement shifted beyond the walls, coordinated, precise, invisible but undeniable. The space outside the door changed before anything inside it did. Adrian turned his head slightly, just enough to check on me one last time, his gaze steady, certain. "This is where it ends," he said. I held his eyes, no hesitation, no doubt. "Then let it end," I replied. And for the first time in 3 years, I meant it completely, not as hope, not as fear, but as certainty, because I was not running anymore, and whatever had followed me here had just stepped into the one place it could not escape. The silence outside the door did not break the way people expect it to. There was no sudden noise, no chaos, just a shift, subtle and controlled, like something unseen had changed direction, and that was when I realized Adrian had already taken control of the space beyond this room before they even understood where they were standing. The presence on the other side of the door lingered for one more second, maybe two, then disappeared, not retreating, not escaping, just repositioning. Adrian did not move. He did not rush to the door. He did not signal anything dramatic. He simply listened. "They felt it," I said quietly. He nodded once. "They realized something changed," he replied. The earpiece crackled, low but precise. "Sir, both subjects have altered their path. They are no longer approaching directly. They are moving toward the secondary corridor." Adrian's expression remained calm, but something in his posture shifted, a slight adjustment, like recalculating a line already drawn. "They are trying to find another way in," I said. "No," he corrected softly. "They are trying to find a way out." That landed differently, because it meant they understood. Not everything, but enough. I felt my chest tighten slightly, not from fear, but from the realization that the balance had already shifted, and they were no longer the ones in control of it. "You changed the pattern," I said. He glanced at me briefly. "I let them see the edges of it," he replied. "Just enough." That was how he worked. Not overwhelming, not obvious, just precise enough to force a reaction. The earpiece crackled again. "Sir, they are splitting. One heading toward the west stairwell. The other is holding position near the service corridor." Adrian considered that for half a second. "Keep distance," he said. "Do not close in yet." I watched him. The way he processed everything without hesitation, the way every decision connected to the next without breaking rhythm, and I realized something that made my pulse steady even more. He was not reacting to them. He was guiding them. "You are directing where they go," I said quietly. He did not deny it. "They believe they are choosing their path," he said. "They are not." The room felt different again, not tense, not uncertain, just aligned, like every piece had found its place. I stepped slightly closer, not thinking about it, just moving into that space where I could feel the certainty in him, the control that never slipped. "What happens when they realize they cannot leave?" I asked. His gaze held mine, steady, unshaken. "Then they stop moving," he said. "And that is when it ends." The simplicity of it settled deeper than anything else. No dramatics. No escalation. Just conclusion. The earpiece crackled again, sharper this time. "Sir, West stairwell subject has stopped. He is not attempting exit." Adrian's eyes darkened slightly, not with emotion, but with confirmation. "He knows," he said. I felt it too. The shift. The moment when strategy meets realization. "And the other?" Adrian asked. Still holding position, came the response. "He is waiting." Adrian nodded once. "Of course he is." A pause. Then, quieter. "He is the one making decisions." I absorbed that, the implication settling in. Two people, but only one leading. That meant something. "So the one waiting is the one you want," I said. Adrian looked at me, just for a second. "Yes," he said simply. Then he turned slightly toward his men, his voice calm, but carrying a sharper focus now. "Close the west stairwell quietly," he instructed. "Do not engage. Just remove the option." The response came instantly. "Yes, sir." I could feel it, even without seeing it. The way the space outside this room was shifting again, narrowing, tightening, every exit becoming less accessible, every movement more controlled. "You are isolating them," I said. He nodded once. "I am removing their choices." The difference mattered. Isolation could be resisted. The absence of options could not. The earpiece crackled again. "Sir, west stairwell is secured. Subject has not moved." Adrian's focus returned to the other one. "And the second?" "Still in position. He is waiting for something." Adrian's expression did not change, but I saw it, the exact moment he understood. He is waiting for confirmation, he said quietly. Of what? I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time since this began, there was something almost like a faint edge of something else in his voice. Not concern, not doubt, just awareness. Of you, he said. The words settled heavier than anything else in the room. I felt my breath shift slightly, not uneven, just deeper. Because that made sense. Of course it did. I was not just the target. I was the reason. He wants to be sure I am here, I said. Adrian nodded. And he will not leave until he is. The silence stretched again, but this time it was not empty. It was waiting, deliberate, focused. I looked toward the door, even though I could not see through it, could not see the person on the other side of all this, but I could feel the presence of it, the intention, the purpose that had followed me for 3 years. Then let him be sure, I said quietly. Adrian's gaze snapped back to me instantly. No, he said. Not harsh, not loud, just immediate. I held his eyes. You said it yourself, I continued. He is the one making decisions. A pause. Then he is the one who needs to step forward. Adrian studied me for a long second, not dismissing it, not rejecting it, just measuring the risk, the outcome, the control. You want to draw him in, he said. I nodded. He is already here, I replied. The only question is whether he stays hidden or steps into the open. The earpiece crackled again, urgent now. Sir, second subject is moving. He is approaching the central axis. Adrian did not look away from me. He made his decision, he said quietly. I felt it. The moment everything shifted again, the final piece falling into place. Adrian stepped slightly closer, his voice low, controlled, but carrying something deeper now. If he comes closer, he said, you do exactly what I tell you. I met his gaze without hesitation. And if I do not? A small pause. Then, softer, but unmistakably certain. Then I make sure it does not matter. The words settled between us, not as a threat, not as control, but as a promise. A promise that nothing in this room would be left to chance. The earpiece crackled one more time. Sir, he is within range. Adrian's focus shifted just enough to register it, then returned to me fully. Stay with me, he said. Not a command, not a request, just truth. I nodded once. And for the first time since this began, I understood something clearly. This was not just the end of what had been chasing me. This was the moment it stepped into the only place it could not control. And Adrian had already been waiting for it. The moment he stepped into range, the air changed, not louder, not heavier, just sharper, like every detail in the room suddenly mattered more than it had a second before, and I felt it in the way my breath slowed instead of quickened, the way my focus narrowed until there was nothing outside of this moment. Adrian did not move. He did not signal anything obvious. He simply stood there, steady, controlled, like the center of something already decided. The earpiece crackled, low and precise. Sir, subject is 10 feet from the door. He has stopped. Adrian's gaze did not leave mine. He is listening again, he said quietly. I nodded once. He wants confirmation, I replied. A small pause. Then, softer, of me. The silence stretched, deliberate, calculated, every second holding its own weight, and I realized this was not just about control anymore. It was about timing. Adrian stepped slightly closer, not blocking me, not shielding me completely, but aligning us in a way that made it clear we were no longer separate parts of this situation. When he moves, he said quietly, you do not react. I met his gaze. I was not planning to. A flicker of something passed through his expression, not quite approval, not quite something else, but it stayed for a fraction longer than anything else had tonight. The earpiece crackled again. Sir, he is adjusting position. Closer now. 5 feet. My pulse remained steady, not because I was calm, but because I had already reached the point where there was nothing left to prepare for. This was it. Adrian did not look toward the door. He did not shift his stance. He simply waited. He is deciding whether to commit, he said. I exhaled slowly. He already has, I replied. The moment the words left my mouth, there was a sound. Soft. Intentional. Not forced. The handle moved. Just slightly. Not enough to open. Just enough to test. Adrian did not react. Not yet. The earpiece crackled. Sir, we have visual confirmation. Subject is alone at the door. No immediate support in sight. Adrian's voice was calm. Hold positions. The response came instantly. Yes, sir. The handle stilled, then moved again. This time, slower. More certain. I felt Adrian's presence shift beside me. Not forward, not aggressive, just ready. The door opened. Not wide, not dramatic. Just enough to reveal a figure in the dim hallway light. Posture controlled, eyes scanning, calculating the room in a single glance. He did not step in immediately. He paused at the threshold. That was the mistake. Adrian spoke first. You made it farther than I expected. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it filled the space completely, leaving no room for anything else. The man's gaze snapped to him instantly, recognition flickering for just a second before it was replaced by something else. Calculation. And you made it easier than I expected, the man replied. His tone was steady, controlled, but there was an edge to it now, something that had not been there before. Adrian did not move. You came for her, he said. Not a question. The man's eyes shifted then, just slightly, just enough to find me standing beside Adrian. And in that moment, everything aligned exactly the way I knew it would. Recognition. Confirmation. Final. Elena, the man said. My name sounded different in his voice. Not familiar. Not personal. Just targeted. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. You followed me a long way, I said quietly. He took a small step forward, just inside the room now, but not far enough to commit completely. You made that easy, he replied. Adrian's presence shifted slightly, not stepping in front of me, but making it clear where the line was. You are not leaving this room, Adrian said calmly. The man almost smiled. Not amusement, not confidence, just acknowledgement. I did not come here to leave, he said. The words settled into the room, heavier than anything before them, because they confirmed exactly what we already knew. This was not about escape. This was about outcome. The earpiece crackled softly. Sir, perimeter is secure. No additional movement detected. Adrian did not respond immediately. His focus remained entirely on the man in front of him. You should not have come alone, Adrian said. The man tilted his head slightly. I am not alone, he replied. A small pause. Then, quieter. I am just the one who steps forward. That confirmed it. Exactly what we expected. Exactly what Adrian had already calculated. I felt his attention shift slightly, just enough to register the information, then settle again. Then the others are already contained, Adrian said. Not a guess. A statement. The man's expression changed, just slightly, the first real crack in the control he had maintained. That was all it took. Adrian saw it instantly. You walked into a closed system, Adrian continued, his voice still calm, still measured. There is nowhere left for you to go. The man's gaze flicked toward the door, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Enough to confirm everything. I stepped forward then, just one step, not enough to break the line Adrian had set, but enough to make my presence undeniable. You wanted confirmation, I said quietly. Now you have it. The man's eyes locked onto mine again, sharper this time, more focused, like he was trying to read something beyond what was visible. You stopped running, he said. I held his gaze. Yes. A pause. Then, softer, and you walked into the wrong place to follow me. The silence that followed was not empty. It was final. Adrian did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to move. Everything that needed to happen had already been set in motion before this man stepped into the room. This ends now, Adrian said quietly. Not a threat. Not a warning. Just the conclusion. The man held his gaze for a second longer. Then something shifted, not defeat, not fear, just realization. The moment he understood exactly where he was standing, and exactly who he had walked in front of. I felt it too, the final shift, the moment where everything I had been running from for 3 years stopped being something ahead of me and became something already behind me. Adrian's voice broke the silence one last time, calm, steady, absolute. You should have stayed hidden, he said. And in that moment, I realized something I had not understood until now. It was never about finding a place to hide. It was about finding the one place where nothing else could. The realization did not come with panic. It came with stillness, the kind that settles in when there is nothing left to calculate, nothing left to anticipate, only the outcome unfolding exactly as it was always going to. The man stood just inside the doorway, not advancing, not retreating, his posture controlled but no longer unreadable, because something had shifted in his eyes, something subtle but undeniable, the moment awareness replaced assumption. Adrian did not move. He did not need to. He had already moved every piece that mattered long before this one stepped into the room. You are quiet now, Adrian said calmly, his voice cutting through the silence without raising it. The man's gaze flicked back to him, steady but sharper now. I am listening, he replied. Adrian tilted his head slightly. That is the difference between you and me, he said. You started listening too late. The words settled heavily, not as an insult, not as a threat, just as truth. The man's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign that the statement had landed. I watched him, really watched him now, not as something chasing me, not as something I needed to escape, but as something contained, something that had already stepped into a space it could not control. You followed patterns, the man said, his attention shifting between us, calculating, searching for something he had missed. For 3 years, you stayed ahead. You disappeared when you needed to. You adapted. His eyes locked onto mine. But you came back. I did not look away. No, I said quietly. I chose where it ends. That changed something. I saw it in the way his posture adjusted, not aggressive, not defensive, just recalibrating. You think this ends here, he said. Not mocking, not dismissive, just testing the certainty of it. Adrian answered before I could. It already has, he said. The calm in his voice was absolute. No hesitation. No doubt. The earpiece crackled softly, almost. An afterthought now. Sir, all secondary exits are secured. No external interference detected. Adrian gave the smallest nod. Maintain position, he said. Then his attention returned fully to the man in front of him. You came for information, Adrian continued, his tone steady, deliberate. You believed she was the variable you could control. The man's eyes flickered again, just slightly, acknowledging the accuracy of that statement. And now? Adrian asked. The man exhaled slowly, not defeated, not yielding, just understanding the scope of the situation differently now. Now I see the full equation, he said. I felt Adrian's presence shift beside me, not moving closer, not stepping forward, just anchoring the space. And you realize you are no longer part of it, Adrian said quietly. The silence that followed was not tense. It was definitive. The man's gaze moved once more, taking in the room, the positioning, the control, the absence of any path that did not lead back to the same conclusion. You built this before I arrived, he said. Adrian did not deny it. I finished it when you did, he replied. That was the truth of it. This was never a reaction. This was alignment. I stepped forward again, just slightly, enough to close the distance between myself and the moment that had followed me for 3 years. You were waiting for me to make a mistake, I said quietly. The man looked at me, steady, focused. Everyone does eventually, he replied. I shook my head. No, I said. I just stopped running long enough for you to follow. A pause. Then, softer, and you followed me here. His expression shifted again. Not much, just enough to show that he understood what that meant now. Adrian's voice cut through the silence again, calm and absolute. You underestimated one thing, he said. The man's gaze returned to him. What is that? Adrian did not hesitate. You thought she was alone. The words settled deeper than anything else that had been said. Because that was the one assumption that had carried everything forward. The one flaw in the entire plan. The man held Adrian's gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, slow, deliberate. Yes, he admitted. That single word carried more weight than anything else. Not resistance. Not denial. Just acknowledgement. The earpiece crackled again, quieter now, almost routine. Sir, all units are in place. Adrian did not respond immediately. His focus remained exactly where it had been from the start. Then we are done here, he said. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. The room seemed to settle around that statement, like everything that had been in motion had just reached its endpoint. I felt it too, the shift inside me, the moment where the tension I had carried for 3 years finally loosened, not disappearing, not erased, but no longer controlling every breath, every step. The man glanced toward the door one last time, not searching for escape, just confirming what he already knew. Then his attention returned to me. You chose your ending, he said. I met his gaze without hesitation. No, I replied quietly. I chose where to stop running. A small pause. Then, softer, but certain, the rest followed. Adrian did not speak again immediately. He did not need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been placed exactly where it belonged. The man's posture shifted one last time, not defensive, not aggressive, just still. The moment of resistance had passed. The moment of realization had settled. Adrian stepped slightly forward then, not closing the distance completely, not imposing, just reinforcing the line that had always been there, the one that separated control from the illusion of it. "This was never your ground," he said quietly. The man did not argue. He did not respond. Because there was nothing left to challenge. Nothing left to negotiate. The silence stretched one last time, but it was different now. Not waiting. Not uncertain. Just complete. I stood there, feeling the weight of everything finally settle into something steady, something real, something that no longer moved with every shadow or sound. Adrian's presence beside me did not change. It did not need to. It had been constant from the moment I stepped into this room. And now, for the first time in 3 years, I understood what that meant. Not control. Not possession. Just certainty. He turned his head slightly, just enough for his voice to carry beyond the room. "It is over," he said. And this time, there was no question about it. Silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt earned, like something had been building for too long and had finally reached the point where it could settle without breaking. And for the first time in 3 years, I stood still. Without expecting the ground to shift beneath me. The man did not move. He did not argue. He did not try to reclaim control that no longer existed. He simply stood there, absorbing the finality of what had already been decided long before he stepped into this room. Adrian remained exactly where he was, calm, steady, unchanged, like nothing about this outcome had surprised him, like it had always been the only possible conclusion. The earpiece crackled softly, almost routine now. "Sir, all subjects are contained. No further movement detected." Adrian gave a small nod. "Maintain positions until I say otherwise," he replied. The response came instantly. "Yes, sir." The structure of his world held firm around us. Every piece exactly where it needed to be, every variable accounted for, every outcome controlled. I exhaled slowly, the tension that had lived in my chest for years finally loosening into something unfamiliar. Not relief. Not entirely. Something steadier. Something that did not disappear the moment I let my guard down. The man's gaze shifted once more, not searching for escape, not calculating a new angle, just acknowledging the reality in front of him. "You built this well," he said quietly, his voice no longer carrying the same edge it had when he entered. Adrian did not respond immediately. He let the silence sit for a moment, then said, "No, I finished what you started." The words landed differently. Not just for him. For me. I felt it in the way my breath caught for half a second, in the way the past 3 years suddenly felt less like something I had survived alone and more like something that had led here, to this exact point, this exact outcome. The man's eyes flickered toward me again, sharper now, more focused. "You changed the outcome," he said. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "I changed where it happened," I replied. A pause. Then, softer, "The rest was never yours to control." That ended it. Not with force. Not with escalation. Just clarity. Adrian stepped forward slightly, not closing the distance completely, just reinforcing the line that had already been drawn. "This is where your part ends," he said calmly. The man did not resist. He did not argue. He simply nodded once, slow, deliberate, accepting the conclusion without needing to challenge it. The earpiece crackled again, low and precise. "Sir, we are ready." Adrian's gaze did not shift. "Proceed," he said. Movement happened beyond the door, quiet, controlled, invisible from where I stood, but undeniable in the way the space changed, the way everything beyond this room adjusted to the final step of a process already completed. The man did not look back. He did not try to hold on to anything that was no longer his. He simply stepped away from the threshold, disappearing into the structure that had already closed around him. The door remained open for a second longer, then closed softly, sealing the moment behind it. And just like that, it was done. The room felt different immediately. Not quieter, not lighter, just still. Final. I stood there for a second, not moving, not speaking, letting the reality of it settle fully, because for the first time in 3 years, there was nothing left ahead of me to run from. Adrian remained where he was, his posture unchanged, his presence steady, but I could feel it, the shift in him, the way the focus that had held everything together was beginning to release, not completely, but enough to let something else surface. He turned toward me slowly, his gaze no longer scanning, no longer calculating, just on me. "It is over," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. I nodded once. Yes. The word felt different than it should have. Not fragile, not uncertain, just true. Silence stretched between us again, but this time it was not filled with tension or strategy. It was filled with something we had not allowed ourselves to stand in for a long time. I looked at him fully, not through the lens of what he represented, not through the distance I had built to protect myself, just him. "You knew," I said softly. He did not ask what I meant. He understood. He always did. "I knew you would not come back unless you had no other choice," he replied. That landed deeper than anything else. Because it was not judgment. It was understanding. I exhaled slowly. "I did not plan to come back at all," I admitted. His gaze did not waver. "You still did." A pause. Then, quieter, "You chose this." I held his eyes. "I chose to stop running." The correction mattered. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once, accepting it without argument. "And now?" he asked. The question was not about the situation, not about the threat. It was about what came after. I felt it immediately, the shift from survival to something else, something I had not allowed myself to consider in 3 years. Now, I hesitated, not because I did not know, but because saying it out loud made it real in a different way. Now I figure out what comes next. He stepped closer then, not imposing, not controlling, just closing the distance that had existed for too long. "You do not have to do that alone," he said quietly. The words settled deeper than anything else had tonight. Because they were not about power, not about protection. They were about something I had not expected him to offer again. I held his gaze, searching for anything that felt like the past version of him, the one I had walked away from, the one I had needed to escape. But what I saw now was different. Not softer, not weaker, just clearer. "You think I will stay?" I said. He did not hesitate. "I know you will not run," he replied. That was the difference. Not expectation, not assumption, just understanding the choice I had already made. I let out a small breath, something almost like a laugh, but without humor, just release. "You always were good at reading me," I said. A faint shift crossed his expression, something close to a memory, something that belonged to a different time. "Only when you let me," he said. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had not been said 3 years ago, everything that had not been resolved, everything that still existed beneath the surface. I looked toward the door for a brief second, the place where everything had just ended, then back at him. "You said this ends tonight?" I said quietly. He nodded once. "It does." A pause. Then, softer, "But that does not mean everything else does." The meaning behind that settled slowly, deliberately, like something I was not ready to fully understand yet, but could not ignore either. I held his gaze for a long moment, feeling the weight of that possibility, the shift from an ending into something undefined. "We will see," I said finally. He did not push. He did not press for more. He simply nodded once, accepting that. Answer the same way he had accepted everything else tonight. Not forcing, not controlling, just present. And for the first time since I stepped into that hallway with a tray in my hands and a past I thought I had buried, I realized something that changed everything. I had not come back to the one place I could not escape. I had come back to the one place I no longer needed to. The room did not feel the same anymore, not because anything had changed physically. The walls were still the same. The city still stretched beyond the glass. The air still carried that quiet, controlled stillness. But something inside me had shifted in a way I could not undo. And for the first time in years, I was not bracing for what might come next. Adrian stood a few feet away, no longer positioned as a barrier, no longer aligned for defense. Just there, present in a way that felt unfamiliar after everything that had happened. The silence between us was not uncomfortable, but it was not simple either. It carried history. It carried everything we had avoided saying for far too long. "You kept the ring," he said finally, his voice quiet, almost casual, but not careless. My hand moved instinctively, fingers brushing against the metal that had never left me, even when everything else had. I did not look down. I did not need to. It was easier than explaining why I took it off, I replied. That was only part of the truth, but it was enough for now. His gaze lingered on my hand for a second longer before lifting back to my face. "That is not why," he said. Not accusing, Not pushing, just knowing. I let out a slow breath, the kind that came when there was no point in pretending anymore. No, I admitted. It is not. The silence returned, but this time it felt different, less guarded, less calculated. He stepped closer, not enough to close the space completely, but enough to make the distance feel intentional rather than necessary. 3 years, he said. You built an entire life without me. I met his gaze. I built a way to survive, I corrected. The distinction mattered. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once, accepting it. And now? He asked again, softer this time. The question carried more weight. Now than it had before, not because the situation was unresolved, but because it was not. Everything that had forced my choices for 3 years was gone. What remained was something I had not planned for. Choice without pressure. I glanced toward the window briefly, watching the city move in its quiet, distant rhythm, then back at him. Now I have to decide what that survival was for, I said. His expression shifted slightly, not confusion, not disagreement, just consideration. It was to get you here, he said. I almost shook my head, but stopped. Because part of me knew he was not entirely wrong. It was to keep me alive, I replied. What I do with that now is different. He held my gaze, steady, patient in a way he had not always been before. You are still thinking like you are alone, he said quietly. The words landed deeper than I expected. Not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I looked away for just a second, not to avoid him, but to process that truth in a way I had not allowed myself to before. I had to, I said. That was the only way it worked. A pause. Then, softer. I did not have you. He did not react immediately. He did not defend himself. He did not interrupt. That alone was different. You chose not to, he said finally. Not accusing. Just placing the fact where it belonged. I felt that one. Not as a wound. Not as something sharp. Just something that had always been there, unspoken. Yes, I said. No explanation. No excuse. Just the truth. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was honest. He stepped closer again, closing the distance this time, but not overwhelming it, not forcing it, just removing the space that no longer needed to exist. Then choose differently now, he said. The simplicity of it caught me off guard. Not because it was unrealistic, but because it was that simple. I let out a quiet breath, something between disbelief and understanding. You think it is that easy? I said. He did not hesitate. No, he replied. I think it is that clear. That stopped me. Because clarity had never been the problem. It had always been what came after. And if I choose to leave again? I asked. The question was not a challenge. It was real. It mattered. He held my gaze, steady, unflinching. Then you leave, he said. No hesitation. No resistance. But this time, it will not be because you are running. That changed everything. Because it removed the one thing that had defined every decision I had made for the past 3 years. Fear. I studied him, searching for something in his expression that felt like the past version of him. The one who would not have said that. The one who would have closed the door instead of opening it. But what I saw now was different. Not weaker. Not softer. Just more certain in a way that did not need control. You changed, I said quietly. He almost smiled. Not fully. Just enough to acknowledge it. You did too, he replied. That was fair. More than fair. The silence settled again, but it was no longer about what had happened. It was about what had not. What we had not said. What we had not faced. Why did you never look for me? I asked. The question came out before I could stop it, quieter than I expected, but steady. It mattered. More than anything else had tonight. He did not look away. He did not hesitate. I did, he said. The words were simple, direct, but they carried weight. I felt my breath catch slightly. Then why did you not find me? He held my gaze, something deeper moving behind his eyes now, something that had not been there before. Because you did not want to be found, he said. That was it. Not failure. Not lack of effort. Choice. Mine. I looked down for a second, processing that, letting it settle in a way I had not allowed before. Then I looked back at him. And now? I asked. The question was different this time. Not about the past. About the present. About what came next. He stepped just a fraction closer, enough that the distance between us was no longer something either of us had to think about. Now you are standing in front of me, he said quietly. A pause. Then, softer, and you are not leaving. I felt it then, not pressure, not expectation, just recognition of the moment we were in, of the choice that existed right here, right now. I did not answer immediately. I did not need to. Because for the first time in 3 years, I was not choosing between running and surviving. I was choosing what came after. And that was something entirely new. There is a moment when everything slows, not because time changes, but because you finally stop fighting it, and standing there in front of him, I realized I had reached that exact point. The one I had avoided for 3 years. The one where there was no distraction left, no danger to outrun, no reason to keep moving just for the sake of staying ahead. Adrian did not speak again right away. He did not need to. The space between us held enough weight already, filled with everything that had not been said before tonight, everything that had been buried under distance, under silence, under choices neither of us had fully understood at the time. I looked at him, really looked this time, not through memory, not through expectation, just the man standing in front of me now, and I saw the difference in ways I had not allowed myself to before. Not softer, not less dangerous, just more deliberate, more certain in a way that did not need to prove itself. "You are waiting," I said quietly. He nodded once. Yes. No pressure, no demand, just space. That was new. I let out a slow breath, feeling it settle deeper than anything else had tonight, because for the first time, the silence was not something I needed to fill or escape from. It was something I could stand in. "You said I am not leaving," I said, not as a challenge, not as a question, just repeating it out loud. His gaze did not waver. "You are not," he replied. A small pause. Then, softer, not like before. That mattered. The distinction. The difference between being held and choosing to stay. I felt it clearly now, the absence of force, the absence of expectation, replaced by something I had not expected from him. Trust. Not in the situation. Not in control. In me. I stepped closer without thinking about it, closing the space that had already started to disappear, not because I had to, but because it no longer felt necessary to keep it. "You are not trying to stop me," I said. He shook his head slightly. No. That simple answer carried more weight than anything else could have. Because 3 years ago, that would not have been true. 3 years ago, he would have closed every door. Now, he was leaving them open. I held his gaze, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that suggested this was temporary, that this was just another version of control in a different form. But there was nothing there except certainty. "That is different," I said quietly. "So are you," he replied. The words settled into something steady, something that did not need to be argued or explained. I let out a small breath, something lighter this time, something that did not feel like it was holding anything back. "I spent 3 years making sure no one could find me," I said. "And now I am standing here, not trying to leave." He did not interrupt. He did not fill the space. He just listened. That was different too. I thought survival meant distance. I continued, my voice steady but quieter now, more focused on the truth than the defense of it. I thought if I stayed far enough away from everything, I could control what happened to me. I met his eyes again, but all I did was keep moving. A pause. Then, softer. I never stopped long enough to choose anything else. Adrian's gaze held mine, not judging, not correcting, just understanding. "And now," he asked. The question was not urgent. It did not push. It simply existed, waiting for an answer that mattered. I considered it, not quickly, not reactively, but fully, because this was the first time in years that I had the space to do that. "Now I am not choosing distance," I said slowly. "I am choosing where I stand." The words felt right in a way nothing else had. Not dramatic, not forced, just clear. His expression shifted slightly, something subtle but real, something that acknowledged the weight of that choice. "And where is that?" he asked. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Here," I said. A small pause. Then, more certain, not because I have to be, because I want to be. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of that decision, settling into place, becoming something real the moment it was spoken out loud. Adrian did not move right away. He did not reach for me. He did not close the distance further. He simply stood there, absorbing it, understanding it, respecting it in a way that did not require anything else. "That is all I needed to hear," he said quietly. I felt something shift again, not in the room, not in him, but in me, the last piece of something I had been holding on to finally letting go, not because it was forced, but because it was no longer necessary. You did not ask me to stay, I said. He shook his head slightly. I did not need to. That was the difference. Not expectation, not control, just trust in the choice I had already made. I let out a small breath, something that almost felt like relief, but deeper than that, steadier. You are still the same in some ways, I said. He almost smiled again, just a fraction. So are you, he replied. We stood there for a moment longer, the silence no longer something to fill, but something to share, something that did not need to be broken to be understood. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had changed, lights moving, people passing, everything unaware of the shift that had just happened 27 floors above them. But inside this room, everything had changed. Not because something ended, but because something else finally began. I looked at him one more time, not with hesitation, not with uncertainty, just clarity. I am not running anymore, I said quietly. He met my gaze, steady, certain. I know, he replied. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Morning arrived slowly, not with noise or urgency, but with light, soft and steady, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows and stretching across the room like something new had been allowed in, something that had been waiting just outside for a long time. I stood there for a moment, watching it move across the glass, across the polished floor, across everything that had felt so controlled just hours ago, and realized the difference was not the room, not the city, not even the situation that had just ended. It was me. Adrian was still there, not in the same place as before, not positioned for anything, just standing near the window now, his attention on the city below, his posture relaxed in a way I had not seen in years. He did not turn when I stepped closer. He did not need to. You did not leave, he said quietly. Not surprised, not questioning, just acknowledging. I shook my head slightly, even though he could not see it yet. No, I replied. The word felt simple. Certain. He turned then, slowly, his gaze settling on me without urgency, without expectation, just present. Good, he said. That was all. No follow-up. No condition. Just acceptance. I leaned lightly against the edge of the table, feeling the stillness settle deeper. Not heavy, not uncertain, just calm. What happens now? I asked. The question did not carry fear. It did not carry doubt. It carried possibility. He considered it for a moment, not rushing to answer, not filling the space just to avoid silence. Now, he said finally, everything moves forward. I almost smiled at that, not because it was vague, but because it was exactly the kind of answer he would have given 3 years ago, only now it meant something different. That sounds like something you have been waiting to say, I replied. He looked at me, a faint shift in his expression, something lighter, something that had not been there before. I have been waiting for you to be here to hear it, he said. That landed differently, not as a line, not as something practiced, just truth. I looked at him for a moment longer, letting that settle, letting everything from last night find its place without forcing it into something it was not ready to be yet. You did not ask me to stay, I said again, softer this time. He shook his head slightly. No, he replied. Because you already chose to. A pause. Then, quieter, that matters more. It did. More than anything else could have. I stepped closer, not thinking about distance anymore, not measuring it, just closing it naturally, like it no longer needed to exist between us. I thought coming back here would feel like stepping into something I left unfinished, I said. But it does not. He studied me, not interrupting, not assuming. What does it feel like, he asked. I considered that for a second, searching for the right words, not the ones that sounded right, but the ones that were right. It feels like I finally stopped at the place I was always meant to understand, I said. He held my gaze, steady, attentive, taking that in without trying to reshape it. And what did you understand? He asked. I exhaled slowly, letting the answer come without forcing it. That leaving was never the mistake, I said. But believing I had to stay away forever was. The words settled into the space between us. Not heavy, not fragile, just clear. He nodded once, slow, deliberate. Then you learned exactly what you needed to, he said. There was no regret in his voice. No resentment. Just acceptance of what had been and what it led to. I let out a small breath, something that felt lighter than anything else had in a long time. You are not angry, I said. It was not a question. It was a realization. He looked at me for a moment, then shook his head slightly. No, he replied. I was. A small pause. Then, softer. But that was before I understood why you left. That mattered. More than I expected it to. And now you do, I said. He nodded. Now I do. The silence that followed was not filled with anything unspoken. It was filled with everything that had finally been said, everything that no longer needed to be held back. Outside, the city continued to move, people starting their day, traffic building, life continuing without pause, without knowing how much had shifted in a single room above it. I glanced toward the window, then back at him. You said everything moves forward, I said. What does that look like for you? He did not answer immediately. He considered it, the same way he had considered everything else, not reacting, not defaulting, just choosing. It looks like not repeating what did not work before, he said. That was simple, direct, and more meaningful than anything complicated could have been. And what did not work before? I asked. He met my gaze without hesitation. Trying to hold on to something that needed space, he said. A pause. Then, quieter, and not realizing that space did not mean losing it. That landed. Deep. Because it was the exact thing I had spent 3 years proving, without ever saying it out loud. I nodded slowly. That is something I understand now too, I said. He almost smiled again, just enough to acknowledge the shared realization. We stood there for a moment longer, the distance between past and present no longer something that needed to be bridged, just something that had already been crossed. So this is not where it ends, I said. He shook his head slightly. No, he replied. This is where it starts again. Not the same, not a repetition. Something new, something chosen. I held his gaze, feeling the certainty of that settle into place, not rushed, not forced, just real. Then we do it differently, I said. He nodded once, final. We already are. The light continued to move across the room, brighter now, clearer, filling the space without asking permission, without waiting for anything else to change first. And standing there, I realized something that felt almost simple after everything it had taken to get here. He ruled the city, but I chose where I stood. And for the first time, those two things did not conflict. They aligned.